Hello, LinkedIn community, and welcome to another episode with Anya. We actually went through a rebrand. We finished our season one of Bad Boss, and now we're doing more of culture crafting. I'm going to be speaking with a lot of leaders of organizations, and leaders like Jim, who is actually leading a Vistage group of CEOs. So let me introduce you who Jim is. As I said, he's a Vistage Chair, recently launched his first Vistage private peer advisory group in San Diego. He helps CEOs and business owners to make better decisions. What I love about him is that he has over 25 years of business experience, including funding and leading 3 different startup businesses, which is a really unique. Most recently, prior to Vistage, he led as COO, a California manufacturing company creating customized wine gifts. So I'm super excited to speak to you about that and how you led that company that had 10x revenue, received 13 Pyramid Awards, as well as a number of best and greatest company to work for. These are the people I want to talk to. And then today we're going to be speaking, about delegation. Hi, Jim. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Anya. I'm really excited to be here and to share with your viewers.
Yeah, you and I had a couple of coffee dates, and I really love like your style of leadership and your unique story. So I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit, like, what's different? There's so many Vistage groups, right, around the country and also in San Diego. So I know a lot of founders and CEOs who are still looking to like, who is the chair? Because my experience is the chair really sets the tone for the group. They're the ones who attract certain members. They set kind of like the unspoken rules and the safety and confidential environment full of trust. So what's unique about your group? What do you know so far?
I love my members. We just have a really good, tight-knit group for as short a period as we've been together. We just mesh really well. We're just off our retreat a week ago, so that was like really empowering. Just how everyone got along, and just the conversations, and it's just a joy to be around all my members.
I saw it. Was that the retreat where you did at the Camp Pendleton?
No, that was Camp Pendleton was like 3 weeks ago. We've been really busy. We actually went to the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna Niguel.
Okay, like that's a little different environment
It's
from being on
completely
the
different
ground in the
from
boots.
Yeah, being on the boots on the ground and firing the guns and doing the confidence course, and then we go to all the way up to the Ritz-Carlton.
I think that speaks a lot, right? The range. You're gonna get all the range. So tell me a little bit about your experience, because you yourself, you've been in the Navy, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So what leadership lessons do you still, I don't know, that still guide your life?
The biggest lesson is really to set the example. That's the biggest thing I got from the Navy, because you're always wearing the uniform and people look at you and they look up to you, and you really have to set the tone to embody what that uniform is, and to project that leadership to your people. But I've gotten so
How does that translate to organizations?
Well, it's how I show up. So I show up knowing that people are looking at me, and I really want to do the best, and I want to model the right behavior for the teams, and I want to do the thing, and I'm not unwilling to do the dirty work that it takes to do, and that showed up throughout. If I always joke that I'm the janitor too. Of all my job descriptions, I don't mind taking the trash out. That's like not beneath me, because whatever I ask my people to do, I want to make sure that they know that I'm willing to do it as well.
But, which comes really like, I'm gonna connect it back to delegation, right? It's like there's a difference between knowing how to do something and helping others do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that transition from like, I know how to do it, I've done the job, and now what was that transition for you to like, how do you actually enable others to step into that role?
Well, you have to model how to do it, so you're showing them. Then you have to come up with some sort of training. How do I share that information with them? How do I transmit that? How do I bring them up so that they understand how to do it? And then you set kind of a standard of excellence of what you want, and then you allow them to do it. You have to allow them to fail. Being a dad, I see with my kids, like, you have to let them fail sometimes. They have to learn through that process too. And so you have to have a little bit of tolerance with your employees and allow them to fail and experiment along the way as well.
That's hard, right? Because it's so easy for us to come in and save the day and be the hero and be like, guys, I got this. I know exactly what needs to be done. I find psychologically that's really hard to just, same like you said with parenting, watch them do the thing, knowing they're not doing it right and they're going to
Mhm.
fail and being okay with it and being like, well, that's their journey, right?
Yeah, and what type of feedback can you give them? Yeah, what can you grab a hold of that went positive to like build them up? Because you don't want to just like be negative, because that'll be very demotivating if it's all negative. So you want to be try to find the positive aspect
Yeah.
of it.
What do you find like in your work, right? Because again, you're leading a group of CEOs. They all come, and I've worked with different Vistage Chairs. I know it's a very safe environment to be
Mhm.
vulnerable and transparent. You guys are processing a lot of issues that are happening. What do you see in leaders? What's preventing them from delegating? What's the mindset?
Um, their mindset's like one, they don't I don't have time. That's like everyone's in the same boat. It's not a unique situation when someone says they don't have the time. It's really like they're not prioritizing what they need to focus on. So they get kind of distracted on doing the things that they're good at, because somewhere along the line they have some sort of technical ability that they're, oh, I'm a good marketer, or I'm a good operator, or I'm a good coder, or something. They do something really well. So they lean into the thing that they've done well at before. And that
Mhm.
kind of gets in the way of doing the big picture stuff, the leading aspect of being
Yeah.
in that CEO or business owner role. Um, they lose the focus of, I need to bring my people up to be able to do all those things. I don't need to be the expert in that. I'm the founder of the company, and I think that, oh, I need to do everything. I need to do everything because I know how to do it right, and I can't trust
Yeah.
them, and all these kind of negative self chatter that they have, um, because they haven't enabled and empowered their people to do the tasks that they want them to do.
But how do you do that if, like you said, some of them don't believe their people are capable or to do it to that extent or like their standard of work, right? We talked a little bit about the
Sure.
excellent standard. So how do you make that switch? Would you recommend them reevaluating their team members and deciding who
Well,
leads?
it's one the great thing about Vistage is you get to work with other people, so you get to see how someone else is doing it. So you see a best practice in somebody else, and
Yeah.
you inside their company, and like, well, how are you doing it so well? How is that working? For you, you're getting this great success. Like, well, maybe I should like maybe I can emulate or steal some things that you're doing and do that a little bit better. But it's really like that, going through that process and having a mindset change. Like you have to shift your mind, your thinking, because you're approaching a situation a certain way, but
Mhm.
maybe there's a little bit different way to do it that I can shift a little bit.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to like prioritizing the training and empowering the people and getting them recognizing that, hey, the people can do the work. I just need to tell them what the work looks like and what is the standard of excellence for doing that work. What is the expectation, and set a good expectation, and then figure out how to train to achieve that expectation.
So let's talk about a team. You have a team, right? And it's an example that you probably and I hear all the time. The team is not used to that type of leadership. The team has not been empowered, right? I work with a leader right now in one-on-one coaching, and he shared with me that his team has not delivered on a lot of priorities. And I said, okay, and then what happened? Nothing. There is no accountability. There is no culture of like that ownership. So how do you make the switch if you've kind of, it's like, with kids, you've allowed them not to have any chores for a long time, and that was okay. And everyone is used to it now. So how
Mhm.
do you, and now you join a Vistage group and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know. I don't have to do sales. I don't have to do marketing. I don't have to be bottleneck to every decision in my company. I have a desire to shift, but I have a whole team that are used to the old way of being. So do you
Mhm.
have any like, I don't know, insights or recommendation? Like, how do you make that shift?
You have to be really intentional, and the intentionality has to have some follow through on it. It can't just be a flash in the pan that, oh, we're going to do it this way now, and then like a week later reverts back to how it was. There has to be some real intention as far as, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to empower the people and have a process. And you have to have a little grace for yourself that it's going to take some time, and the people are going to have to get there. You have to go small little steps, and slowly but surely they'll start to feel more empowered over time. as you shift the responsibility for them to do it, you have to allow them, give them tasks to do and allow them to have successes. And then the more successes they have, then the successes will build upon
Mhm, mhm.
themselves.
I love that you're bringing up that whole like strategic change management initiative because again, a lot of leaders, and we talked a little bit behind the scenes, like if you look at their disc profile, a lot of them are very dominant in the red. That's what allowed them to be successful. They're go-getters, they're problem solvers, they have the answers, they're very self-assured, right? So a lot of those leaders have created, right, the environment also where they don't have time to explain. It annoys them that they have to explain because in their minds they're like, well, you should see it already. And I've seen a lot of kind of like this type of leadership fail because they also go from 1 to 100. We had zero delegation and now we delegate everything. We had zero accountability and now we're introducing performance management and keeping people to their KPIs within the next 30 days. And you can't do that. What you're saying is like those small steps of like creating a strategic plan for this change management initiative and saying, hey, how can we start changing the mindset and then introducing the systems and then coaching and training and then allowing for mistakes and developing feedback mechanisms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And training our people on coaching skills. So that's what I hear you say. It's like, how can you be very intentional and strategic that, hey, this change takes time. It's not going to happen just because you're like, you know what? As of Monday, I went to my Vistage meeting. Here's how it's going to go now.
Yeah, no, we call that the day after Vistage. You have to be really careful about that.
Do not make any decisions.
You get filled up with all this great information, but you really need to stop and think about how are I going to be able to implement this? What's the follow through going to be for this new initiative? Because you don't want to just whiplash the people. It takes a long time for an aircraft carrier to change course. It doesn't just happen really quickly. And if it does happen really quick, if you put the helm over really hard, a lot of things are going to get broken along the way because the ship's going to tilt too much. So it has to be kind of a gradual progression to get where you want to get to if you want to make a change, a lasting change.
And I think that's where people freak out, right? Because now the ship is falling, what feels like falling. So they jump off the ship. They're like, oh, yeah, no, that's not going to work for us. It works for some other people, but it's not going to work for us.
But the more that you empower the people, then the better results you're going to get because your people are going to have so much better ideas. That's the whole total quality management that came out like in the 80s and 90s, as far as like the good ideas percolate from the bottom up. It's not from the top down.
Yes.
In my last job, like the person who was in charge of our office manager, and we wanted to celebrate birthdays. And I was like, we'll just do a cake thing. And she's like, no, let's get some balloons. I'm like, all right, we'll get the balloons. And then she came back like, oh, I bought a helium tank and we have our own capability to do our own balloons. I'm like, wow, that's like great. Never even would have thought of that. Yeah. So here's an example of like an idea that came from the bottom. That was like phenomenal idea. Like, let's have our own helium tank at office so we can create balloons for everyone's birthday.
But it's not just balloons, right? Now we're creating a culture
of
recognition. Like it goes so much, like it expands, right? Because now it shows like this is not a one-time thing. It's a commitment to change and creating something that will live and probably beyond you.
Well, that's how you empower, you get people excited because their workstation or their desk when they came in for their birthday was like all sorts of like decorations all over the place. And it was like, that was a great culture that people celebrated each other.
Yeah. So you shared with me that you were a single dad, which again, I know we kind of joke that it's like, it's a unique thing. And yet so many people, right, are like single parents. So talk to me a little bit about how that experience being a single dad kind of allowed you to really focus and like anything that you remember about that time period where you had no choice to switch to and start delegating.
Yeah, November 13th, 2015, my kid's mom, she moved back to the East Coast. And I had two teenagers, 12 and 14 at the time. And so I was the adult. I had to take care of them. So I had to kind of figure it out. I was chief operating officer for my previous company. So I had responsibility for my employees, and then I had the kids, and now I had to get them to doctor's appointments and do the school things and get them to sports because they're all in sports. So yeah, it was a challenge. what I figured out I had to do was I had to distill down, like, what's the core of my leadership? Like, how can I have the most impact in the least amount of time? Because I had to leave work early. I'm leaving at like 4 o'clock. Sometimes I had to leave at 2 o'clock or
Yeah.
whatever from work. It's like, you just got to do it because that's what's required for the,
Yeah.
with the kids. And then I realized I really needed to delegate. That's what I needed. That was the key. I needed to really empower the people that I had. I needed to keep the environment. I mean, we were progressing along that, but I realized I really, really need to um, rely on them to do. So you create great expectations. You have good training. You're very consistent, and you create a good routine that they can follow. We documented like crazy. I stole that
Yeah.
from the Navy.
The systems and
Policies,
processes. Yeah.
procedures, processes, write it down. And I would refer back to it all the time, because like, oh, I can't remember what I wrote down. What did I write to say about this policy, how we're going to do things? So we're just very consistent. And that consistency was really important. And then the employees thrived on the consistency, and they thrived on the ability to have freedom to make decisions. I gave the example of like the balloons. That was a freedom to make that decision. Like, great, go do that, spend the money,
Decentralizing that power. Yeah. And
decentralizing, making sure that they had the ability to do things, and then they all performed. We created custom wine bottles. We were sand carving wine bottles. All my production managers were female. They're all female in there, and they had very limited education. They weren't qualified to do the job, but they learned it from the bottom up. But then I ensured that they knew how to lead. And then we took people who from a very small company with like 10 people. Eventually, we got up to like at Christmas time pushing over 40 people. So it's a different management style from leading a small team to leading a team with like 40 people, and like what's required for that. So we had multiple levels of managers. That we built. We had work center managers, we had area managers, and then we had the production managers. So we have 3 levels of managers that like I had to create just on our operations team.
yeah.
And they did a phenomenal job. And
Was that to create layers so that also kind of accountability and ownership can trickle down? Was that the kind of thought behind it?
Yeah, so they can focus on their area and they could get really good at their area, which we did. Externally, we got all sorts of awards. We got awards for our quality. We got awards for customer service. We got best company to work for, greatest company to work for.
That feels so good.
Yeah, the employees, they loved working there, and we created an environment and a culture that people wanted to work.
Yeah.
And were attracted to work, and we did great on retention because we kept the core people.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I love how you said, I had to really get strategic with distilling. And that's something that I talk a lot about. Like, what are you really good at? Like, I know you're good at many, many, many things, but what is it that only you maybe can do right now? And actually like being very like one of the tools I use, and happy if anybody wants it on LinkedIn, it's a template where you actually list all the tasks. You look back at your calendar. My calendar is like color coded with different categories of activities, right? There's sales activities, there's client work, there's creative time. I have a category that says like personal BS. And those are like the appointments, the stuff that just needs to happen. And looking back at a calendar, listing all the activities, and then almost like deciding like, can admin do that? Like, is that a $15 an hour job? Like, why am I doing this? Is this a manager level? Is it a director level? Is it a CEO level? Yeah. And it's very humbling to see.
Do only what you can do. Yeah. So at the CEO, business owner level, there's certain things that only you can do. And you need to make sure that you're focused on doing those tasks, because like you said, you can hire someone for $15 an hour to do that other task. And that way you can focus on the things that is at your level that only you can do.
And I think that visual representation of like, oh my God, how much of my time am I spending in a very like, in a role that I could hire out for like $20 an hour. And yet I'm spending my time and energy. Am I going to do it the best? Maybe, probably not, but maybe. And even if so, like, how can I normalize that? Maybe it's not going to be done up to my standard, and that's okay. And I think that's the switch where it's like, yeah, people are going to fail. People are not going to do it as well as you. Can you be okay with that for the sake of growth and expansion? Yeah. I feel like that's the trade-off.
The thing that, the interesting thing is, if everything's set up right, the result is going to be better than what you can do. ultimately
Eventually.
they're going to be focused on just one little area, and they're going to do phenomenal on that. If you hire the right people and you give them the right support, they're going to like knock it out of the park pretty much consistently. People have this idea that only I can do it that well. Like, how can you be a master at all these things?
Yeah.
I'm going to hire somebody to be a master at like one or two things, and they're going to do a great job on that.
Yeah, and they're gonna love doing it versus like I do it. And often I think another kind of filter I put through, does it give me energy or does it deplete me?
Mm-hmm.
Even if I do it well, but there's some things that excite me and create that aliveness and vitality in me, and other things that I can do them well, but I'm like it just depletes, like that feeling of, dread.
And
I think
you delegate that thing that depletes your energy to someone else, because they're going to be energized by doing that thing. That maybe that mundane task, that repetitive, but some people like mundane and repetitive, and they get joy from that because they know that consistency and they like routine. So everyone leans into different areas. So that's where you can find someone who can excel in that.
I love that. I love that you're sharing those very specific examples, right? And how do we empower people? So, Jim, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this conversation. If anybody is looking for a peer-to-peer group, can you remind people what's the qualification? Because I know some founders and CEOs want to join, and I know there are also different levels, but you have a CEO group, right?
I mean, chief executive group, and that's really like 5 million in gross revenue and above. Developing your second line managers, so really developing their systems. And I'm also recruiting right now actively for a small business group, and that criteria for Vistage is like between 1 million, maybe a little bit less, up to like 5 million. Really developing the first line managers, starting to develop the policies, procedures, figuring out how to get out of that solopreneur mentality to break through to having a team that can support them. And that's an area that's really near and dear to my heart, and I have a lot of expertise in that, starting from zero and how to ramp up into the millions.
I love it. So guys, reach out to Jim. I will also link him on our website, on Spotify, on YouTube, everywhere where you can find this podcast. And thank you so much for just sharing your leadership style and what you believe in about delegation. I hope people find this valuable. And again, small steps, like what's one step? For me, I'm going to share my step and then I want to hear from you. My first step would be go through your calendar and identify things that you should not be doing. Like that is you can outsource pretty easy. What would be your first step if someone is stuck and is not delegating?
Start somewhere. Start in something that you don't really want to do or you don't necessarily have the expertise, but just start somewhere and to figure out how can I define those requirements and have somebody do it and give them a specific deadline, and then come back with a success.
Yeah.
See that they can be successful, allow them to feel successful, and then what would be the next step after that? But like create success somewhere.
I love it. Great. Yes, don't forget, guys, set up your people for success, not for failure. Performance management is not about punishment. It's about enabling people to get the job done. Thank you. And leave your comments.
Anya, this was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.